Michigan pushed a button switching the city's drinking water source from Detroit system to the Flint River, later admitting their critical failure to treat that river water, causing it to corrode lead pipes and poison people.
There's concern tonight about staying safe from potential lead poisoning in people's water lines across the state. Utah water districts we talked to today say there's no need for alarm, but they're sending out notices to let people know they may be at risk.
Thousands of Nashvillians receiving letters from Metro Water Services saying their water pipes either had lead, galvanized metal, or the material is unknown.
You may be wondering, what is lead poisoning and why doesn't it happen everywhere? Now, in order to answer this question, we have to trace back to the history of lead and how it unfairly poisons millions of Americans over others. Solid at room temperature, yet very easy to shape.
Lead. It's a strange substance found in the earth, practically indestructible and remarkably recyclable.
These characteristics of the heavy metal were the reasoning behind why it had been used for plumbing in the first place. The first civilization to harness lead were the ancient Romans, who used this useful element in the pipelines of possibly the world's first municipal plumbing system. This system was copied thousands of years later. In 1754, the first United States lead plumbing system was created in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. This went on to start the reign of lead in the country as more and more states and cities were created. Following suit, these places forced water and lead into an intimate relationship that would cost the country millions of dollars in lives. But more on that later. By 1900, more than 70% of cities with populations greater than 30,000 used lead water lines. Surprisingly, harmful effects of lead were documented before it became a widespread resource for plumbing. Journal articles, research papers, and even state government departments realized the threat of lead. Even though most of the American population realized that lead poisoning was a real issue, industry and state governments were not active in stopping or slowing the issue. One of the giants that prevented this backlash was the Lead Industries Association, or LIA, made in 1928. To ensure the economic feasibility of lead was placed before its health effects, the various industries under this association created newsletters, lobbied the federal government, and convinced plumbing services to cement lead into the lives of citizens all across the country without concern for health. Yet, the government did nothing to prevent this from happening. Before the 1960s, the government's power when it came to lead was to merely investigate possible hazards and suggest changes to the industry. As expected, this passive form of regulation did not change the mission of the LIA. Manufacturers were assumed to investigate and control the hazards that they created, but none of this came to fruition. But the poisoning effects of lead could not be silenced anymore. Once lead enters the body, it enters the liver, kidneys, lungs, brain, spleen, muscles, heart, and skeletal system.
Getting large amounts of lead into your bloodstream can kill you in all sorts of ways, from killing your kidneys to causing brain damage and liver damage. It's especially harmful in even low amounts in children.
Developmental issues, behavioral problems, learning disabilities, low IQ, and impaired hearing can be accredited to low lead levels in children. High lead levels can lead to comas, seizures, and death.
1 in 3 children worldwide is now affected. It's around 800 million children across the globe.
Half of U.S. adults, that's 170 million people who were adults in 2015, were exposed to harmful levels of lead as children.
From 1960 to 1980, virtually every single child in the U.S. would have had lead levels in their blood that today we consider toxic.
It is clear that the government was obligated to step in to save its children and citizens. In response to the absence of federal regulations, the Safe Drinking Water Act was signed into law. In 1986, Section 1417 was added, which was the first law that prevented the installation or repair of any water system with a lead pipe in the United States. This was followed closely by the Lead Contamination Control Act of 1988 and put a spotlight on lead-lined water coolers and lead contamination in school drinking water. The year 1991 saw the passage of the Lead and Copper Rule by the Environmental Protection Agency, which required water systems to be tested for lead and copper. The 2011 Reduction of Lead Drinking Water Act created a stricter definition of what pipes contain lead.
Not only are we setting a priority, we're showing up as a partner to get it done.
Almost a decade later, the most recent and hopefully last measure to stop lead contamination in waterways was in 2024, with the Lead and Copper Improvements Rule. It gave us a deadline to replace all lead pipes in 10 years.
You know that 18-year-old intern in your office who thinks he's so damn smart? Well, he probably is, because he was born after America's lead epidemic. You got lucky, Sawyer. Now go get my coffee. But even though we drastically cut back on the amount of new lead that we put into the world, we were still left with all the lead that was already there.
The Environmental Protection Agency estimated that 9.2 million lead service lines are still operating in the United States. The damage of indecision can be seen all around the country. Possibly one of the most notable lead water crises was that of Flint, Michigan. But perhaps the most important thing about this water is where it did not happen. For example, let us look at the Ann Arbor, just outside of Detroit. Lead poisoning cases are way lower in Ann Arbor compared to Flint because of income. Then what about in Chicago? Look at this graph. When income level is low, there's a higher percentage of lead pipes. Why?
The Biden-Harris administration knew that cost was going to be a problem.
Replacing these lead pipes, like the water pipes are underneath, like they're underneath our streets and underneath our houses.
Heavy construction, large amounts of labor, and most importantly time is needed to remove every lead pipe. A recent study by the EPA found that it would cost close to $28 billion to $47 billion to replace all lead service lines. This money would be distributed through the bipartisan infrastructure law to the states to help pay the cost of replacing the lead pipes, but the funding given to the agency was 1/3 of that, a mere $15 billion. Not only is this not nearly enough funds, it also does not take into account the real issue that some areas are more affected than others. For example, Indiana was given more than $43 million on a subsidy for lead pipe replacement. However, Nebraska was only given a little more than $28 million. This might seem unfairly distributed in Indiana's favor, but Nebraska actually has less lead pipes to replace. So instead, Nebraska was only given a total of $291 to replace every lead pipe in the state, but Indiana was only given $149. In another example, Texas was given $221 million, which gave the state an additional $821 to spend on operations to replace each lead pipe, but Hawaii was given $28 million, which gave them $10,000 to replace each lead pipe. Instead of giving funds to those that need it the most, the money was distributed to states that may or may not have lead pipes, but there was still time to change this. The EPA's Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey and Assessment, or DWINSA, was performed in May of this year, and many advocates called upon the EPA to adjust the funding allocation since it was not helping states that need it the most. Although the EPA was able to directly calculate how many lead pipes are in each state, their report states that, quote, funding for most states will not change or will only be minimally adjusted.
I think that unfortunately the way that our government is set up, trying to get funding to fix problems like this can be an issue, especially in areas that don't have tax revenue that can be used to fix those problems.
Having a 10-year window to solve a national problem is already strict enough, but without proper funding, the responsibility of replacing these pipes falls in the hands of the residents of these communities, which do not have the money to pay for it either. I am standing there puzzled, unable to decide whether the veil is really being lifted or lowered more firmly in place. At first, it is understandable. The government doesn't want to pay the bill, but there are also several other benefits that come with solving this socioeconomic issue, and their cost return is greater than how much it would actually initially cost to fix the problem. A report by Brookings finds that removing lead from all drinking water in the state estimated the cost would range from $1.5 billion to $4.1 billion over 20 years, but the resulting increases in lifetime productivity, earnings, and taxes paid would give the state a return of $4.2 billion to $8.5 billion, creating a net profit. Not only do other researchers find this to be true, but the US EPA does as well, as the EPA estimates that on average, every year after the lead and copper rule improvements is issued, it will protect up to 900,000 infants from having low birth weight, prevent ADHD in up to 2,600 children, reduce up to 1,500 cases of premature death from heart disease, as well as preventing up to 200,000 IQ points from being lost in children. And the EPA also highlights several benefits of removing lead pipes from impoverished communities, such as improved overall health, saving nearly $786 billion through avoiding healthcare costs. If only we had some true friends, some who saw us more than convenient tools for shaping their own desires. The government knows that there are benefits, but they are doing little to make it better. Because the government does not take these actions, the people of low-income communities have to live with the government's poor decision.
Instead of a $550 repair, her bill ballooned to nearly $7,700.
I cried. I broke down.
She worries about the flood of emotions that'll hit other homeowners across Illinois.
We have seen many cases where states are given inadequate funding to remove their pipe problem.
The Metropolitan Planning Council says Illinois isn't getting its fair share of the federal money needed to fix that.
When it comes to paying for it, there is federal money. So Texas had more than $220 million to give out this year for projects. But the requests that came in for that money, they totaled more than $4 billion to be covered through water rates.
And this is going to affect everyone. So
without additional outside funding, this would result in an increase of more than 70% to our retail customers.
The project estimated to cost about $60 million in Muskegon, money the city doesn't have.
It is huge. You know, basically, if we didn't do anything to raise rates to try to support that, we couldn't afford to do it over the next 30 to 40 years.
It is going to take a lot of money to solve problems like the one here in Hamtramck and other cities across the state. The question is, where's that money going to be coming from?
So the consumer has to pay. In Rhode Island,
costing to your home roughly $4,500.
You know, nobody here has the money to actually replace all their pipes. $4,500 for me is devastating.
In Texas,
the letter is where you come in. There might be lead pipes in your house, on your side of the meter.
In Wisconsin,
under the plan, a property owner would pay for 1/3 of the cost, roughly $1,600 on average.
Taxpayers should not be on the hook for the lead and the poisoning of our people.
According to Randy Connor, a commissioner of the Chicago Department of Water Management, lead service line replacement can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $40,000 per residence. While some homeowners may meet income requirements to get their service line replaced for free, many residents need to pay this fee right out of their own pockets. I want you to imagine someone coming to your house and asking you for about $8,000 to replace something that can end your own life. Absolutely absurd, but some people do not have the money in order to be able to do this.
How do you feel about the fact that it's 2023 and you have lead pipes for your drinking water?
I mean, I hate to say that it doesn't surprise me.
Middle class and upper middle class neighborhoods have tax dollars that can be used to replace infrastructure, where lower middle class and poverty-stricken areas do not have money to just replace that infrastructure.
Some places like Munster or Highland might not have lead, and we do. It comes down to economical backgrounds. People in Munster tend to make more money and have more money than people in Chicago.
Up with that kind of money would really be a hardship.
Semi-retired and on a fixed income, Alice Jagar owns a very old home. She could be forced to buy into the city's new plan.
This is one of the main reasons why low-income residents are stuck with lead pipes, because they have no way to get rid of them. And with all of the funding opportunities, does the government just turn a blind eye to them? They knew how much it would cost, but cut the funding. Not even the federal government will pay for their health, so they are left to slowly poison themselves or fear their own faucet.
Right now, we don't prioritize taking care of the people that have the least.
East Chicago, the water could be contaminated with lead.
I used to come over here and get a glass of water from the sink. But now, I mean, I wonder what I have inside me.
All these years later, Adia still uses bottled water to wash her food and feed her cats. Robbie has brushed his teeth with bottled water his entire life.
I don't drink tap water. We don't drink tap water at all. We buy water.
I will not drink the water.
Why not?
Because I don't want lead in my body.
The EPA tonight is warning the people of Newark, New Jersey not to drink the water because the lead levels are too high.
And the EPA is pressing the city to give out bottled water, writing, "We are unable at this time to assure residents that their health is fully protected."
We just need all the lead lines replaced. We don't need them replaced 8 years from now. We need them replaced as of yesterday.
Many people, they're still using bottled water because the public system is not fully safe.
In Pittsburgh, PWSA said some of its water recently tested at 18 parts per billion for lead, a number which puts it higher than where Flint's water is currently.
We would have to bring, these big, 24 packs of water bottles to school because we couldn't drink the water. Everybody in their homes in East Chicago, they would buy a lot of water bottles because they couldn't drink the water inside of East Chicago.
It is hard to imagine that these are actual real people just like us. Imagine if we could not drink the water in our own school, how could we allow this to happen?
Did you guys feel like your neighborhood was forgotten and being left behind?
For years, yes, we have.
And who cares enough about these people to look past the economics and give them free lead pipe removal? If we cannot provide that, then do we really care about these people? And in their own way, are they invisible? At first you tell yourself it's all a dirty joke or that it's due to the political situation. But deep down, you come to suspect that you're yourself to blame, and you stand naked and shivering before the millions of eyes who look through you unseeingly. Does the government really care? So how do we solve this? The answer is pretty complicated. On one hand, the upcoming administration puts the fate of not only lead pipe removal at stake, but the entirety of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. The only real way to create change is to reach out and try to make change.
I mean, we need to reassess what we spend our money on as a country.
Lead poisoning may be a heavy issue, but it's still possible to solve.
Environmental law and regulations weren't created because someone said, ooh, we should probably build these regulations. It's probably not that good releasing all these gases in the atmosphere, No, what happened was there was a mistake and people were like, ooh, we have to make rules. Environmental law is always kind of playing catch up. And that kind of creates a problem. It's like, oh, people got cancer from this. I guess we have to do something.
The delay of lead regulation and the inefficient removal of the contaminant from our water teaches us that we have to set these standards. We have to demand our help. Stay informed where lead may be lurking, because we may not be able to see it, and if you do not see it, who will?